Hi, I'm Yaakov Katz, and welcome to the Jewish People's Podcast by JPPI. Last Saturday, a 12-year-old Jewish French girl was at a park in Northwest Paris with a friend when a group of three boys came up to her, dragged her to an isolated shed nearby, hurled anti Semitic abuse at her, and then raped her. The gang rape has made international headlines. French President Emmanuel Macron has said that schools in France are being threatened by the scourge of anti Semitism. A January 2024 report by the CRIF, the Council of Jewish Institutions in France, said there had been a 284% increase of anti Semitic acts between 2022 and 2023. And 13% of such acts last year took place in schools. A significant spike has already been reported in France as well as other places around the world in anti-Semitism in the wake of the 7th October Hamas massacre against and inside southern Israel. Anti-Semitism is undoubtedly on the rise, and the question that people will always wonder is what can be done. To try and get some clarity, I sat down this week for an in-depth conversation with Fiamma Nirenstein, an Italian-Israeli journalist, author, former politician, who was recently appointed Israel's special envoy to combat anti-Semitism. Fiamma, who is also a fellow at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, discusses ways to criminalize anti-Semitism, as well as what the rise of the far right in Europe means for Israel and the Jewish people. We met in her beautiful home in Jerusalem. It's an interesting conversation. I recommend that you have a listen. Here we go. Fiamma, it's great to have you with us on the JPPI podcast.
Thank you
so
for
much for
having
joining.
me. Thanks.
So we're doing this a little differently, as our viewers can see, and our listeners might not know, but I'm actually in your wonderful, beautiful home
Thank you.
in Jerusalem, and it's really special and very Italian from what I can see. But we're here because Fiamma, not only, I mean, you're a former lawmaker, parliamentarian in Italy, very closely following what's been happening in the European Parliament, the rise of some of the more far-right parties. We're going to talk about that. But first and foremost, you recently received an appointment by Foreign Minister Israel Katz to serve as the special advisor, special envoy for the combating anti-Semitism. So I think everyone has seen after October 7th, anti-Semitism exploded around the world.
Sure.
Definitely in the United States, we've seen it, in North America, but also throughout Europe. And I mean, tell us a bit about what you see the challenges are, and how do you feel that maybe in this new role, which I know is just coming now together, but how do you feel in this new role, what can be done to try to fix the situation?
First, I will just try to draw the frame of this. I've been writing something like 15, 20 books and an incredible number of articles about anti-Semitism, always since 30 years onward, pointing to the same aim, explaining that once anti-Semitism was religious, then it became racial, and nowadays it identifies the Jews that must be hated, eliminated, killed in the state of Israel. This is what I tried to explain for so many years when nobody thought about that. And I think that Robert Wistrich and Bernard Lewis were my teachers in that. I was lucky, and I met them when I was young, and they just brought me on studying this subject. And nowadays, I think that this point has become terribly important for the survival itself of the state of Israel. Ecco. So if you ask me what I think I should do, trying modestly to help the foreign ministry, pointing to a special kind of political attitude, it is, the point is to understand that anti-Semitism is nowadays a strategic threat to the state of Israel, and therefore it's a strategic threat to democracy and freedom. So I think that basically from the point, there are many points of view that can be put down. There is the social, the technological, the cultural point of view that you can put down thinking about anti-Semitism. If you think about foreign policy, and this is what we're talking about, that's the real junction between the state of Israel and the rest of the free world.
Well,
Fighting anti-Semitism is just fighting together for freedom and for the basic right of understanding the world from a democratic point of view. Otherwise, you enter into a terrible confusion, which is where the world is today after I was saying 9/11, which it was just a part of which is a part of the story, of course, after the 7th of October.
which is 15 9/11s to some extent
See,
in terms of the
exactly,
scope.
exactly.
But
For us, for sure, it
Right.
is a total 9/11 for
of
us.
course, but I think that if I understand what you're saying, also Israel as a government has long looked, I felt over years, and I worked at one point with the Diaspora Affairs Ministry, so I got to see
Sure.
kind of how their perception was. This was already about 10 years ago, but I got to see how they viewed the combating anti-Semitism. It was, we have to help the Jews overseas, right? We have to help Jews. But what you're saying, because it's a Jewish problem, and we as the state of Israel have a responsibility towards Jews around the world. So that element exists, but you're saying it's something bigger. This is a direct threat on the state of Israel. It's not just about the Jews outside of Israel.
So first of all, I think that we have to help the diaspora. That's for sure. That's our first commitment. The Jewish people is part of our people. We are part of the people of Israel, and the people of Israel connects all the Jews all over the world. Having said that, I think that we will help the other nations in the world to understand what is really anti-Semitism about, and what is the reason why they help to fight. Look what's happened in France just this morning while we are talking, okay? A little girl, 12 years old, has been sort of kidnapped and in any case sexually
Assaulted.
assaulted.
A Jewish
Yes.
kid.
A Jewish kid. You know how these guys explained the reason why they assaulted her? Because she was a Jewish in our class. They were in the same, and one of them was the boyfriend of the girl, and she never told us that she was Jewish. Look at the confusion in the head of these boys. Look at how they consider being Jewish a mortal sin that has not been confessed to them. Look at that. They think that raping a girl is something that is allowed in the case that you have a Jewish girl in your hands.
Well, they learned from Hamas, right? They learned from the US.
Exactly. That's for sure. That's for sure. And they think that when they present their point of view, they think that they can put down the point that this girl, after all, was guilty of two terrible things. One, that she is Jewish, and secondly, she did not confess the sin. So this shows you how the confusion now took the hearts and minds of these youngsters all over Europe, all over the world. It took it so much that when there was the exhibition about our Hatufim in New York, and then there was outside
Massive
a
demonstration.
massive demonstration against it, even Ocasio-Cortez had to protest about that.
Right.
Yeah. So you see what's going on. They are just come si dice, tying themselves inside a sort of an incredible bozzolo. I don't know how to express it, where you are inside. You don't see outside. You don't understand what's going on. You don't know history. You don't know philosophy. You don't know literature. You don't know what will happen in the world. You know nothing. You are just an idiot that is fighting against. Think about the Germany in the 30s. This is what it was. Among them, there were the best pianists, the best writers, the best musicians, the best philosophers.
But you get caught up in this group thing.
And then they became.
You lose. I wrote a piece over the weekend. I've been thinking about this, especially after the 4 hostages were rescued, 10 days ago or so, 11 days ago. And I went on BBC and CNN and was being interviewed, and everybody's saying to me, well, what about all the people that you killed? Why did Israel kill so many people? And it was so weird. It was like it was an alternate reality. We did what any country would do, save its people. And you guys are focused on the people who were killed. But why were our people even in Gaza? Why were our people being kept in apartments? And they can't. It's like as if brains go out the window
Exactly.
when you think about Israel and
Your
Jewish people.
express is exactly what I'm saying now. And what kind of mind goes out the window? What goes out of the window is the mind of human rights. That's the first kind of, the religion of our time. What is the religion of our time in a time when religions are just a part of the structure of democracy? Then there are all the other kind of people, but everybody in the free world pretends that they believe in human rights. Now see what's happened. And you can see this in the pyramid of the United Nations. The United Nations, the UNRWA, whatever depends on the United Nations, the ICC, the ICJ, the Human Rights Commission. What are they doing? They are all involved and asukim and busy taken into condemning Israel. If it was not tragic, if it were comic,
Yeah.
because it is something that, and look at that, the 7th of October has been completely removed. Nobody mentions it anymore. They just say that we have brought to Gaza famine, which has been demonstrated now that was completely untrue.
Right.
Macron prohibited to Israel to enter the exhibition.
The Eurosatory, the big
yes,
defense
on the basis of a false information that we shoot on the people in the tents in the humanitarian side of Rafah, and it was not true. All of this persecution, that we are racist, that we are that we are genocidal, just name it, whatever is against human rights, the human rights defender put on us and discriminate the Jews without having ever been discriminating. No China, no Iran, no Boko Haram, no. So that's anti-Semitism today.
No, that's definitely anti-Semitism.
It's the destruction of the religion of human rights. Ecco, this is what I want to underline here.
And you see how the organizations, and what you're saying, the organizations that were established to enshrine and protect human rights, whether it's the International Criminal Court, whether it's the International Court of Justice, whether it's any other, the United Nations, of course, has long become a circus. All of these are being weaponized against Israel and being used for exactly in a corrupt manner to actually attack the victims, who was us in this case. But so I want to ask you the question that everybody asks, right? Which is, okay, so what can be done? I mean, people will tell you, well, Israel, everyone always says to me, Yaakov, you guys got to do a better job at explaining yourselves, as if only if we explained ourselves better.
No.
But I say to that, we could explain ourselves the most amazing way, but when you have a foundation and an undercurrent of anti-Semitism, it won't make, it'll help a little, but it's not going to, like, I don't think that when the BBC woman or man, who the reporter is asking the questions, I don't think they are they might be Jewish, they might be married to a Jew, but they come from a culture of within the media organization that is anti-Semitic. So what can we do practically?
Allora, first of all, we must understand that it's absolutely a duty, and it's very good to stick to the memory of the Holocaust and to tell the story. But I am with Ruth Weiss when she says that telling the story too much, insomma, telling the story all the time will make them wish to do the same. Yeah. This is what she says. It's terrible, but I think it's absolutely true.
Can I tell you something just on that note? There's a comedian, Modi, a famous Jewish comedian. I once saw a bit of his that he said, you always have these people who say something anti-Semitic. And then what does the American Jewish community say? Okay, we're going to take you to the Holocaust Museum, right? We're going to educate you. They go to the Holocaust Museum. So he was making a joke. He was saying, do you realize what you're doing? You're taking the anti-Semite, you're taking them to the Holocaust Museum, and they're walking through and they're saying, wow, this is amazing. I can do even more, right? Which is.
This is exactly it. Also because we must never forget that the tree from where this a big part of this anti-Semitism comes from is the Muslim side, which has been for a long time when the Nazism existed to the Nazi ideology. Then it jumped to the communist ideology. But before that, the connection between Haj Amin al-Husseini and Hitler,
The Grand Mufti.
the Grand Mufti, yes, was absolutely natural for the movement that started putting bombs in Jerusalem and wherever else when they thought that they could kick the Jewish out since that time. So what can be done? Criminalize anti-Semitism. This is one of the most important things. That it doesn't exist a chart in the United Nations. You know, there are charters that criminalize every kind of thing against the children, against the gays, against women. And there is nothing that criminalizes anti-Semitism. And then when they mention anti-Semitism, they always feel the duty of naming anti-Semitism together with Islamophobia.
Right.
Exactly.
Because you got to be politically correct.
See, if I can, you know, there might exist some Islamophobia, for sure. There is some in the very, very right wings, in the deep right, far away from where we are and where we live. But it's just a very small part compared to anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
So it's really funny to think that you can take the two things together and mention them every time there is something that looks like a condemnation of put them together. So now, first of all, criminalize it. Find it a good amana, which I think that, for instance, Ambassador Alan Baker wrote a very good draft of that. By the way, here I want to mention that I've been working all of these years with my institute, which is the Jerusalem
Center for Public
Affairs, now named for international for foreign affairs. It changed its name.
Oh.
Yes, Jerusalem Center for Foreign Affairs. It's now
led now by Dan.
And there I already was the responsible for the anti-Semitism side. We have written plenty of things. Dan Diker had written about BDS and about the American universities, and so we have plenty of materials ready for this. And Alan Baker wrote just how to criminalize anti-Semitism in the Jew way. I think that this is something that should be taken into.
So that's one. So basically, getting governments around the world or international organizations
to sign,
to criminalize.
To criminalize.
Because what has been happening on that note is there has been this push, right, for countries to adopt the IRA definition of anti-Semitism.
That's good. I think it's still good. In fact, as it is good, there is a lot of discussion about it. Why? Because the IRA definition is the first one that defines anti-Semitism also in terms of hate toward the state of Israel. So that's the real point. And so there are plenty of groups, and it was even here in the conference in Jerusalem that started this, that the president invited, but already here and then in the United States, this discussion about if this should be a real point is there, but it's so clear that it is a real point and that anti-Semitism is mostly against the state of Israel. Why? Because of so many evident reason, because when it criminalizes Israel for something that is never used as an accusation toward other states, so it is a double standard attitude, and then it's a total criminalization about things that never happen, like apartheid, or it's about things like that. It's so clear it's anti-Semitism. You go to the definition of Nathan Sharansky of the 3D, it's always there. It's always the best.
Demonization, delegitimization.
Exactly, and it's always the best.
Yeah.
I think it's always really.
And by the way, it's always there. It's always true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So criminalization, what else can we do?
Allora, we can, I'm speaking now because it's quite evident that we must try to educate, okay?
Yeah.
So we say the truth, we say the truth, we say the truth. I write every day a piece. I have every morning at the radio my program, and then in the evening television. That's my life since the 7th of October. But beyond that, what the foreign ministry can do is to make the international public opinion join around that,
Mhm.
which means inviting, giving prizes, blaming,
Calling people out for being
calling
anti-Semites.
people out, exactly, calling people
Being
out,
more active.
being more and more active wherever there is anti-Semitism. So being extremely attentive and giving a lot of courage to the Jews all over the world, because the Jews expect from us to be defended.
Yeah.
You know, they are afraid. They are afraid. You speak to an Italian Jew or to a French Jew, and they are anxious and
You see it. I mean, you see, I was in the US recently. You see it all over the US. I was in the London not long ago. I mean, I was walking down Regent Street, right downtown,
Yeah.
main part of the city, and one of my children FaceTimed me and said, "So is it really bad on the streets?" And I said, I just happened to be walking in front of me. I said, I flipped around the camera and I showed them, I said, look who's walking in front of me. There was a young guy, just happened to be in front of me, wearing a keffiyeh and a Palestinian flag over his shoulders, right? I was not wearing a kippah on the streets of London because that I don't think would be smart. But you hear this from a lot of the people there. Okay, so let's talk for a moment about what's been happening in Europe, right?
Okay.
And we saw, for example, Macron, you mentioned France before, he's now called early elections
Yes.
after the unbelievable showing and victory, it has to be said, of the more right-wing, far-right
Absolutely.
parties in the European Parliament. You see Spain, Belgium, it's happened, UK, Nigel Farage is now, the Reform Party is increasing. What is
In
this?
Holland, we have also.
In Holland, we have it. What does this mean for Israel? What does it mean for anti-Semitism?
Look, it's. I think. I think
Because
it's
here,
something
let
which
me
is.
just set it up. The dilemma that some people say, what do you mean? Le Pen, she's pro-Israel, right? I mean, but
Look, she's not only pro-Israel. She has changed a lot. Just the nature of her party. You know, she was ashamed that her father was an anti-Semite, because her father was, yes, an anti-Semite. But that kind of anti-Semites, the right-wing anti-Semite, you know, it's just a kind of plant that has been drying up. It doesn't. It exists in some little corner,
Mhm.
but also people like Marine Le Pen, or like, you know, even Giorgia Meloni had
Minister
in
of
her
Italy.
party some anti-Semite. This is not there anymore. I don't think so.
So-
And even Orban, you know, I just name him because I know that the name of Orban is already a scandal in itself.
Right.
No, I don't think he's anti-Semite. I'm sorry if you ask me. I don't think he's an anti-Semite. There is a problem, and the problem is his relationship with Putin. That's another story.
Viktor Orban.
See, for me, this is just my personal opinion. I think that nowadays Putin, I never thought that he's an anti-Semite in the sense that he hates the Jews, but I think that he's an enemy in the sense that he's an ally to Iran, the Hezbollah,
Yeah.
Hamas, China. So I mean, there is a group of states that strategically cannot be considered a friend by our. So the moment when the nation moves to that side, but I come back immediately. So what I want to say is this: it's said, it has been said for the Jews to understand that the left was no more their hometown.
Right.
It has been very sad, even for me. I was a leftist when I was young. I'm no more. I'm sorry to say, but I was obliged to leave that home by the political events and what I have been seeing developing toward the Jews themselves. I've learned a lot with Wistrich about that. So I'm sure you have read what he has written about the left and the Jews. And then there are many books about that I've been reading. But mostly it's my own experience. Now, it was quite normal for the Jews after the Nazi fascist persecution to think that their natural home was the socialist home. Then we have been deluded by the Stalinist attitude and all the communist attitude that developed nowadays into the idea that all the oppressed have an oppressor who is the enemy, and that Israel is a part of these oppressors, and that the Jews are nowadays white supremacists or something like that. That's ridiculous, but it's their ridiculousness, not ours. We were never so stupid to imagine that we are part of a strong mm, kind of power that in the world will define and govern the world. No, this is not us. We are the Jewish people that has the right, as any other nation, to its own nation. And on this, we have to base. The Jews have survived all the time, okay? And also, our nation is a part of our survival. Without our nation, we don't survive anymore, and that's quite sure. No, nowadays it is so self-evident, mostly after what's happened to us, after this wave of anti-Semitism. Nowadays, can somebody among us not define himself as a Zionist? I don't think so.
It's becoming much harder. Yeah.
Eh, It's becoming much harder. So I think, yes.
Also, because being against Zionism is basically that's anti-Semitism today. Also,
Exactly.
right. You don't have to love the state of Israel, but if you're against the state of Israel,
Myself, I have
Right.
I have to love the
well,
state of Israel.
you.
I feel I love the state of Israel. I think that also for
Of
you.
course, I
it's-
love the state of
Heck,
Israel, but when I
love
see
it so
right.
much. I
Yeah.
mean, it's my love with my family and my friends. It's my
But
love.
the Jews still in some of these countries.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
interesting. I meet them and they're afraid of the so-called far right.
I don't think they're afraid. I think they are afraid to change their mind. I think that they are afraid of their friends. I think they are intellectual, as I'm sure that your friends in Europe or in the United States, for sure, there are more intellectuals than taxi drivers. Okay,
Mhm.
so if they were taxi drivers, and I have some friends, Jewish friends among the taxi drivers, Rome is a very popular city for the Jews.
Mhm.
There are people there, people that are Jews. They're not afraid. No, they're not afraid of the right. Well,
But is it
they are. Some of them are conformist, so they conform to the way that their parents were.
no, that I understand, but is it also because if I understand what you're saying I'm not you're not worried about the right, but you are worried about the left, and that's where the anti-Semitism has come from. Is it a problem that these Jews, for example, outside of Israel, in Europe, let's say, it's hard for them because of what you said, that their roots are in the left. It's hard for them to come to terms with the fact that that's where anti-Semitism is coming from.
First of all, for sure, it's very, very hard.
I mean,
for
you see,
them.
by the way, in America, still predictions are 76% of Jews, 75% or so, will be voting for President Biden. President Biden is not an anti-Semite.
There are different.
No, it's not
polls
anti, but there
about
are
them.
people in the
There are
Democratic
different
Party
polls.
that are anti-Semites.
Sì. Guarda, I think, yes, it's very hard for the Jews to admit that some plenty of anti-Semitism, the most of anti-Semitism of today comes from the left. Now, there has been this unholy marriage between the left and the third world countries that has been celebrated first and foremost by by the Soviet Union, and afterwards by the United Nations.
Right.
That's a marriage, that's the marriage where when they vote, there is the automatic block that always votes against Israel. This is what has happened. Nobody can argue with that. Now, if you ask me if a Jew can be leftist, I think so. Yes, of course.
Mhm.
No problem about that. Not at all. One of my sister is a leftist. We don't talk much about politics, but we love each other very much.
Mhm.
And am I a right winger? Yes, I am. But and am I a traditionalist? Yes, I am. But I'm not religious, and I am liberal about many things. You asking about the LGBTQ, I am totally liberal about that. You ask me about women, I am a feminist of the first phase. I funded, yes,
Mhm.
the first review by the name of Rosa if somebody wants to go and see for that, I would be delighted. That was so long ago, but it was the first feminist review. It was a very intellectual feminist
In Italy.
review. I was communist at that time.
Uh-huh.
Then I came to Israel in 67. My family sent me here as a very young girl because, they were sick and tired of these feminists. in the, in
They
the
wanted you to straighten out in Israel.
and after that, I came back to Italy. They just the students. And when I said I've been in Israel until now, during the war of 67, I was in Kibbutz Neot Mordechai. They took me up and threw me out of the room. So you understand, that was the beginning of a new way of looking at things with broad, open eyes and trying to understand what was going on. And so I kept part of it, what my parents, my father came with the Brigada. My mother was a partisan. We are a very liberal, very Jewish family. But I have a lot of respect for it, but I hope so much in today's situation that also the left with the right will be able to keep some unity, because that's really
It is, I
hard,
mean,
yeah.
to wrap up, is there this war will end, hopefully at some point,
Si.
hopefully soon. We'll get back to that.
Si.
We'll get back the hostages, hopefully soon, at least those who are alive, who can still be saved. And once that happens, things will calm down to some extent, at least on the Gaza front. And I presume that around the world, there won't need to be protests all the time. There will be less of that overall tension, but it's still there. We can't become complacent again, right? People very easily could fall back and say, okay, everything's okay now, but it's still not okay.
No, it's not okay. It's not okay, but I think that what is not okay is the fact that we have learned that all the steps that we took toward peace were misunderstood. We misunderstood internationally. Proofs of this is that they ask us today to recognize a Palestinian state after what has happened today. I think
Right.
that is completely impossible nowadays. Things must happen before we can sit again and discuss it.
I talk about 2 generations of de-radicalization,
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
or at least 1 generation. To think that we're
But
going
do you
from
re-
here to a
See,
Palestinian
but
state.
if you talk to my friends, and there are very many and very good Medio Orientalists like Bernard was, and for instance, today Harold Road, and you ask them if this deradicalization is possible, they will answer to you that only at the price of a detachment from the religious education. In the next months, we can get to some point. I don't see the Palestinians in there. I'm sorry. I don't
Not
know.
now. No, I agree with you. Now, impossible to imagine.
That's really impossible to imagine. I don't know. I've seen, for instance, there were before the idea of the Americans of that how do you call it, where the ships should have arrived,
The pier.
that broke into pieces.
Yeah.
That was also, this was
Lots of money went down.
yeah,
with that.
but the Minister of Foreign Affairs had a project for an island in front.
An artificial island that would bring in.
Well,
goods.
I think that's a good idea. Maybe
Yeah.
because I became familiar with that ideas recently. I studied some of the things that were written and said about that. That's a very good idea to give independency and in the same time control to the place. Independency and control, and now more control after the 7th of October, for sure.
My fear, though, is that the world, we know how people have such a short-term memory, and we'll want to keep that control, and the world will be like, well, no, but things are quiet. You can give them more and give them more, and the pressure will be on to give more and take away control and stop controlling, which I think is the big lesson of October 7th is right now we can't. right? We can't go back to a thinking of we close the gate, lock the key, and throw it away. That we did. We did that twice, 2005 in Gaza, 2000 in Lebanon, and look at how it's all blowing up in our face, right? We sadly,
Oslo agreement blew up
Oslo
in our
agreements, of
face.
course.
That was the
Right.
worst of all, because afterwards we had the second intifada. That
Exactly.
that was really the most
any
terrible.
any idea of containment is out the window, and it applies to Hamas, Hezbollah, and it also applies to anti-Semitism, I think, in what we're talking about. And you're trying to spearhead that.
Guarda, look, I was in Durban in 2001. It was just before 9/11,
Right.
and it was not a matter of chance. So, everything. Well, it started before 1975 at the United Nations, Zionism is racism. There is the root of anti-Semitism. That the great invention of Arafat, when he goes to Vietnam, and what's the name of the Jap? The Jap told him, look, you have to make of your issue not a regional issue. You have to make it a worldwide independency issue of liberation of the people from colonialism. And he comes back and starts building this idea. There is the nut.
That's where
That's where anti-Semitism can again flourish after Haj Amin al-Husseini. Arafat takes it into his hands, brings it to the United Nations with Waldheim helping him. And then again, 2001 in Durban, then we have this terrible explosion. I was there and I was writing, and I will tell you one story. When I was there was a demonstration. They were marching with the portrait of Osama bin Laden in the streets.
Wow.
The NGOs and with the people of South
This is
Africa.
before 9/11.
Exactly. That was 2 weeks before 9/11. No, I remember it was just very close to each other. So I called the newspaper and I tell them, you know what they were, because I was covering them with articles where I say, anti-Semitism is here, anti-Semitism is here. They'd say, well, quiet down. That is an organization which is called United Nations. It's not the anti-Semitic face of the word. I say, no, this is anti-Semitism. They say anti-Semitism is here. And then I tell them, look, they march with the portrait of Osama bin Laden. So the guy who was the boss of the Foreign Affairs Office tells me, Fiamma, when will you stop thinking about this poor pastore, the one that goes with the sheep in the field?
Shepherd.
These poor Saudi shepherds.
A poor Saudi shepherd, he was not, but yes.
And this is what he told me.
Well, Fiamma, I want to thank you very much for joining
You're
us.
so
Thank you for
welcome.
being with us on
Thank you
this
for
on the
having me.
episode, and good
It
luck
was a
with the new
pleasure.
appointment. And to our viewers and listeners, thank you very much for being with us. You can catch us always on Mondays and Thursdays for another episode of the Jewish People's Podcast with JPPI. In the meantime, have a great weekend.